We'll continue with body image and eating disorders. This is part 2. So what is eating clean, folks? Here's a bunch of different word cloud, word salad I call it, that talks about what eating clean is. I have to say that I think it's a continuum. It starts off like other eating disorders with you thinking that you're in charge and that you're enjoying food and that you're doing what you're supposed to do, that it's not a diet, that you're eating all these ways that you're supposed to do, made up by rules. I don't know who makes up those rules. You tell me. But then some people are actually worshiping the food, and their identity is the food that they eat. And then what happens over time is that they may become imprisoned by the food. That's my concern about these kinds of phrases. Dr. Allison Chase, an eating disorder specialist, I really like her quote. Any eating behaviors that involve restriction or rigid rules is concerning and can be a precursor to diagnosable eating disorders. How many of you have apps on your phone about diet, about exercise, about food? Well, honestly, I do. I think I have about 3. So I'm not going to tell you not to have them, but my question for you to think about is, why do you have them? Are they telling you what to do, or are you telling the apps what to do? Do you feel like your day isn't complete until you've made a certain amount of steps, until you've eaten a certain number of carbs? Why do you use these apps? That's my question. Food doesn't have a morality. It's just food. Let's enjoy it. I decided to make Kimberly Wilson's podcast optional. It's an excellent podcast. I would encourage you to have a listen. She talks about how she is concerned with what we're doing with our bodies and what the media is telling us what we're supposed to do when we eat and how we feel. And I'll just give you a quick summary of some of the things that I got out of her podcast. And if you think it's something that may be of benefit to you, please have a listen. Her podcast is called Have We Pathologized Feeling Full? And she refers to this as the beginnings of health anxiety, or actually part of a continuum of health anxiety, in which there are symptoms that are so vague they could apply to anyone and everyone, that it's basically turning aspects of biology into a sign of a problem. Examples of symptoms that are vague are bloating. And bloating is a normal phenomenon that can occur after you've eaten a meal. She calls bloating a quote-unquote round tummy after eating, because that's how it's been described by some of her patients. The thing is, with health anxiety, bloating makes you feel like you did something wrong, and that if you had done something right, you wouldn't feel this way. Well, bloating is a normal response to food. It's a normal response to eating, and that as long as your digestive system is working, that feeling of fullness will go away after your body uses the food that you've been eating. But unfortunately, health anxiety leads to moralizing, and it makes you feel like you've overeaten, and that when you've overeaten, you're out of control, you're a failure, you're sinful. And that's a problem. Remember, food isn't morality. It's just food. We need to chill out. How many of you have heard of this condition, Orthorexia nervosa, an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating? This actually isn't in the DSM-5 yet, but I think that eventually it will be. I want to describe to you some of the characteristics of orthorexia nervosa, because honestly, I'm more concerned with this with your demographic than I am, let's say, with anorexia or bulimia, because it seems to be a socially sanctioned eating disorder. And people don't realize that they're having problems with food and with the food that they eat because everybody around them is telling them that this behavior is healthy. So let me go over some of the basics of orthorexia. It's a pathological preoccupation with nutrition and diet far beyond that which is necessary for health. It's this preoccupation to the point where your concerns about nutrition and diet become unhealthy. And it has an undue influence. That diet has an undue influence on how you evaluate yourself. Think back to the beginning of the semester when we talked about mental health, and when behaviors become disorders, when they begin to affect your daily life, when they cause distress and disability. It's fine for you to want to pay attention to your diet. It's fine for you to want to eat foods that are good for your health. But And these behaviors exert an undue influence on how you feel about yourself. And people who are developing orthorexia have a phobic avoidance of or response to foods they perceive as unhealthy. They don't even want to be around them. They won't be around people who may not be eating the quote-unquote right types of food. Oh, here we go. Refusal to be in proximity of such foods, and they experience panic while watching others eat. This is different from the eating disorder in the previous video, ARFIDs, because that's the individual who experiences panic while they're actually eating the food. Here, the person experiences panic while watching others eat the food. They experience severe emotional stress, or they may perform self-harm after eating a food considered unhealthy. And it's a persistent failure to meet appropriate nutritional needs, leading to a nutrition deficiency and or psychological dependence on supplements in place of food. And this is crazy because they believe that synthetic nutrients are superior to those found in food, or they believe the food is contaminated. And I have to say, except in cases where food is known to be contaminated, that would be a logical concern, but this is an illogical concern. Folks may cut out entire food groups and label foods as good or bad, and only eat organic or only eat clean. So this is a concern because there's a lot of media influence on the development of this kind of disorder. I showed you in the previous video that Panera talks about only having clean ingredients, that people feel like they have to eat organic foods because they think that they have more nutrients or that they're healthier or that they don't have any pesticides. And this isn't true, but their marketing is really good. And what happens is people just don't eat fruits and vegetables if they feel like they're not eating the right kinds of fruits and vegetables. Now I have down here at the bottom, it doesn't really matter if a person meets the criteria if they're suffering, right? If a person is suffering, they should be helped, even if they aren't meeting what are considered criteria for orthorexia. No one should suffer over their concerns about food. Food is meant to be enjoyed. People with orthorexia follow a restrictive diet prescribed for a medical condition they don't have, or in order to prevent an illness that's not known to be influenced by diet. Foods that they may have heard are cause inflammation. Foods that they may have heard increase the immune system. Well, we've talked about what happens when you boost your immune system. You don't want to boost your immune system unless you're sick. People with orthorexia insist on health benefits of the diet in the face of evidence to the contrary. And this condition has a marked interference with their functioning in society or with their activities of daily living, ADLs, activities of daily living. They're isolated. They avoid social functions where food may be served. They neglect work, school, family responsibilities because of their food-related activities, because they have to buy their specific types of food. They have to prepare it a specific way. And unfortunately, what happens is they believe that food is their primary source of happiness, self-worth, and meaning.